The date always came around like a curse. September 14th. 22 years since Claire had vanished. 22 years since my world collapsed in one night, and I was branded a murderer. I lit a single candle on the kitchen table, the flame trembling as if it knew my guilt. The house was silent, except for the tick of the old wall clock, a sound that reminded me of prison. 22 years of ticking clocks, steel bars, and the whispers of men who called me wife killer. I'd been released 3 years ago. The courts had overturned my conviction after a new lawyer proved the evidence was flawed. But freedom hadn't erased the stain. Neighbors still looked at me like a monster. Strangers crossed the street when I walked by. No one saw me as Mark Turner, the man who once had a wife he loved. They only saw the man accused of making her disappear. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, though I hadn't planned to. I had promised myself tonight would be different. Tonight I wouldn't sink into the memories. Yet here I was, drinking alone, staring at the empty chair across from me. Claire's chair. The air carried her ghost. I could still hear her laugh sometimes, echoing faintly in the corners of the house. I could still picture her standing by the sink, humming softly as she washed dishes. That image hurt more than any prison cell. I pressed my hand against the cool glass of her framed photo on the table. She was 20 at the time. Golden hair, bright eyes, and a smile that felt like sunlight. I used to believe that smile was mine. But when she vanished, the police said otherwise. They painted me as a jealous husband, quick-tempered, controlling. A man who had snapped. They never found a body. That was what saved me eventually. But it was also what damned me. People don't forget when a woman disappears and her husband is left behind. The whiskey burned my throat as I swallowed. I closed my eyes, trying not to remember the trial. The prosecutor's voice, the jury's cold stares, the words life sentence, echoing like a hammer blow. I had been 30 then. Now at 52, I felt older than death. I glanced at the clock. 11:58 p.m. The day was almost over. Another anniversary survived. Another year of ghosts. I whispered into the silence. Happy anniversary, Claire. The words tasted bitter. I pushed back my chair, ready to blow out the candle, when something strange happened. My phone buzzed on the table. At this hour, no one called me. I picked it up. An unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me tightened. I answered. At first, I heard nothing but static. Then a woman's voice, faint, cracked, but unmistakable. Mark. My chest clenched. My grip on the phone trembled. No, it couldn't be. Mark, it's me. Her voice. Older, raspier, but her voice. Claire's. The candle flickered violently as if the room itself recoiled. I staggered back, heart pounding. For 22 years I had lived with her ghost. But ghosts didn't call in the middle of the night. Before I could speak, the line went dead. Silence swallowed the room. I stood frozen, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My pulse thundered in my ears. Had I imagined it? Was it the whiskey twisting my brain? But no drink in the world could conjure her voice. I looked at the candle again, its light weak, trembling like me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in the house, and that was far more terrifying than solitude. I barely slept after that call. Every creak of the house, every hum of the refrigerator, sounded like footsteps, like whispers. Her voice lingered in my head, looping over and over. Mark, it's me. By dawn, I sat slumped on the couch, the candle long dead, the whiskey glass untouched on the table. My body was numb, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Had she really called? Or had loneliness finally broken me? The answer came the next morning, not from Claire, but from the world. I was pouring black coffee when the phone buzzed again. Not a call this time, but a flood of messages. Old neighbors, distant relatives, even numbers I didn't recognize. My screen filled with words like, is it true? And she's alive. I turned on the television. There she was. The newscaster's voice was calm, detached. But the headline at the bottom of the screen nearly knocked the air out of me. Missing woman found alive after 22 years. The image beside it. Claire's face. Older, lined, heavier around the eyes, but unmistakably her. My wife. My supposed victim. I dropped the mug, coffee spilling across the floor. Dark and bitter like the pit in my stomach. The reporter continued. Authorities in Colorado have confirmed that a woman identified as Claire Turner, who disappeared in 2003 under suspicious circumstances, has been found alive. She is currently cooperating with law enforcement. Sources indicate she may provide new testimony regarding her disappearance. My pulse pounded so hard it drowned out the words. Cooperating. Testimony. I staggered back, pressing my hands against my temples. It was real. She wasn't a ghost, a drunken hallucination, or a voice conjured by grief. She was alive. She'd been alive this whole time. But where had she been? And why now? I sank into the couch, my legs trembling. 22 years of hell. The trial, the conviction, the prison walls closing in. All of it had been built on her absence. And now she appeared on national television, as if she'd just stepped out of a shadow. The camera cut to shaky footage outside a small-town police station. A crowd of reporters swarmed, microphones raised, but the focus was Claire. She kept her head down, hair hanging in front of her face. When one of them shouted, "Do you have a message for your husband?" She froze, her lips moved, but no words came. She simply turned away, escorted quickly into the building. I leaned forward, my breath short. The look on her face wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. It was hatred. That's when rage broke through the numbness. 22 years she'd let me rot. She'd let the world believe I had killed her. And now she returned, not with explanations, but with silence. Silence that would only feed the whispers of my guilt. I grabbed the remote and slammed it onto the table. The screen went black, but her image burned behind my eyes. I wanted answers. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and scream, "Why? Why did you do this to me?" But dread gnawed at me too. If she told them something, anything, the case could be reopened. And this time, they might not let me go. The phone buzzed again. Another message. "Mark, I saw the news. You need to talk to a lawyer. Now." It was from my old attorney, the one who had fought to get me out. My hands shook as I set the phone down. No, I couldn't go through this again. I wouldn't. But deep down, I knew I had no choice. Claire was alive, and the truth, whatever it was coming for me. I looked at the clock. Almost noon. Less than 12 hours since her voice cut through the static. Already my life had unraveled again. I closed my eyes and whispered, not to her ghost this time, but to the woman herself. "What do you want from me, Claire?" The answer would come soon. Too soon. The call from the police left me hollow. I sat frozen for minutes after hanging up, staring at the phone in my hand. My lawyer's warning still echoed in my head, but now the law itself was summoning me. By late afternoon, I found myself driving toward the station. The world outside blurred past the windshield. Shops, traffic, people walking their dogs, all living ordinary lives while mine spiraled back into the nightmare I thought I'd escaped. The station loomed ahead. A box of concrete and glass, familiar and suffocating. I had walked through similar doors 22 years ago in handcuffs, the taste of metal on my wrists. Now I walked in free, but it felt the same. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. A young officer led me down a hallway, his voice clipped, polite but distant. He didn't look me in the eye. They never did. When we stopped, he gestured toward a frosted glass door. "She's inside," he said, my chest tightened. I gripped the doorknob, but my hand wouldn't turn it. My breath came shallow, sharp. For 2 decades, I had pictured her face in a coffin, in dreams, in nightmares. And now, alive, breathing, waiting. I pushed the door open. The room was small, windowless, painted in dull beige. A table stood in the middle with 2 chairs on each side. And there she was, Claire. Her hair was darker now, streaked with gray, pulled back from a face marked by lines and wear. Her eyes, those sharp blue eyes I used to love, were still piercing, but colder, older. She sat stiff, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if bracing against an earthquake. When her gaze met mine, the world stopped. For a heartbeat, I saw the young woman I once adored. The woman who used to laugh at my bad jokes, who once pressed her forehead against mine on sleepless nights. But that vision dissolved as quickly as it came. Her eyes hardened. Fear flickered there. Fear and hatred. I stepped inside, the door shutting softly behind me. My throat felt tight, my voice almost gone. "Claire," I managed. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She just stared, her chest rising and falling in sharp, shallow breaths. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity. Two ghosts staring across a table. Both unwilling to blink first, finally she spoke. Her voice was rough, deeper than I remembered, but laced with venom. "You look older." I flinched at the sound of it. 22 years I had waited to hear her voice, and the first words she gave me were not warmth, not explanation, but a dagger. "So do you," I said quietly. Her gaze narrowed. "You thought I was dead. You made me think you were dead." My hands tightened on the back of the chair, my knuckles pale. "You let them put me in a cage for half my life." For a moment, emotion cracked across her face. Not guilt, not regret, but something raw. Pain. Then she steadied herself, sitting taller. "You don't get to play the victim, Mark." Her words hit me harder than any prison fight. She looked at me as though I were the villain in her story, as though everything I endured was deserved. I wanted to demand answers, to drag the truth out of her right there. But the door opened again. A detective stepped in, his expression unreadable. "That's enough for now," he said, his tone firm. "We'll speak to both of you separately." Claire broke eye contact first, turning her face away, as though the sight of me sickened her. I stood rooted to the floor, every nerve in my body screaming, every memory clawing back to life. Seeing her should have brought relief, proof that I wasn't a murderer. Instead, it reopened wounds so deep I could feel them bleeding all over again. As the detective guided me out, I glanced back one last time. Claire's shoulders were hunched, her head bowed slightly. She looked fragile, but her presence filled the room like a storm cloud. And I knew then this wasn't the end of the nightmare. It was only the beginning. The detective led me into another room, one with thicker walls, no windows, and a tape recorder already humming on the table. He gestured for me to sit. I lowered myself into the chair, my chest still tight from seeing Claire. Across the hall, she was giving her own statement. I could feel it through the walls, her voice steady, shaping a story that would cut me open. The detective folded his arms. "Mr. Turner, Claire claims you tried to kill her the night she disappeared. She says you attacked her, that she barely escaped with her life." His words hit like a hammer. "That's a lie," I snapped. My hand slammed against the table before I could stop myself. "Then tell me what happened." I drew in a shaky breath. 22 years ago felt both distant and immediate. The night replayed in my mind. The shouting, the slammed doors, the final glimpse of her face before she vanished. We fought, yes, I admitted. About money. About her seeing other men. But I never laid a hand on her. She left on her own. She staged this. The detective's gaze was sharp, probing. Why would she do that? To punish me, I said bitterly. To destroy me. And it worked. 22 years in a cell, branded a murderer. He scribbled notes but gave nothing away. Hours blurred. They pressed me about our finances, about the loan I had taken without telling her. They asked about the neighbor who claimed he heard shouting that night, about the broken lamp in the living room. Every detail of our marriage was ripped open like a wound. And then came the hardest part. Claire says you told her, and I quote, "If you ever leave me, you'll regret it." Did you say that? I closed my eyes. The memory hit sharp. I had said it, in anger, in fear of losing her. Not as a threat, but as a desperate plea. But on paper, in her mouth, it sounded like a sentence of death. Yes, I whispered, but not the way she's saying it. The detective leaned back, his silence heavy. When they finally let me go, I felt gutted. Walking down the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Claire through the glass of another interview room. She sat upright, calm, her hands folded neatly. She didn't look like a victim running from terror. She looked like a woman in control. Her eyes lifted, locking onto mine through the glass. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she gave the faintest shake of her head, almost imperceptible, like a warning. I stopped cold. What did it mean? Was she telling me to stay silent? Or was it her way of saying I'd already lost? The detective beside me cleared his throat. "We'll be reopening the investigation," he said flatly. Given her testimony, we have no choice. The words settled like chains on my shoulders. I was free only 3 years, and now the bars were closing in again. As I stepped outside into the fading daylight, the sky hung low, gray and heavy, mirroring the storm inside me. Reporters waited at the entrance, their cameras flashing, voices shouting questions I didn't answer. Did you try to kill your wife, Mr. Turner? Do you have anything to say to Claire? I shoved past them, my head down. At home, I collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion pressing me down. But sleep wouldn't come. All I could see was her face in that glass reflection. Older, harder, filled with something I couldn't name. Maybe hatred, maybe vengeance, or maybe the truth was even worse. The next few days blurred into interrogation rooms and endless retellings of the same story. Every question dragged me deeper into memories I thought I'd buried. The detectives wanted details, the fights, the silences, the threats, and with each recollection, I began to doubt myself. Mr. Turner, one detective said, flipping through notes, Claire claims you controlled her spending, tracked where she went, and isolated her from friends. Is that true? I clenched my fists. I watched our finances because we were drowning in debt. I asked where she was because she'd vanish for nights without explanation. That isn't control. That's survival. But as the words left my mouth, a flash of memory surfaced. Me checking her purse when she came home late. Me snapping at her for buying new shoes when we couldn't pay rent. I'd told myself it was responsibility. She had called it suffocation. In her interviews, Claire painted the walls of our past with darker colors. He wanted me small, I overheard her say through the thin corridor walls. Every word, every choice, he twisted it. If I laughed too loudly, he'd glare. If I spoke to another man, he'd sulk for days. He made me believe I was worthless without him. Her voice was steady, unshaken. Listening, I felt the room tilt around me. Was that true? Did I glare? Did I sulk? I couldn't deny it. But was that control? Or just the clumsy anger of a young man terrified of losing his wife? Flashbacks came unbidden, like ghosts rising. I remembered our kitchen, cluttered with unpaid bills. She leaned against the counter, her arms crossed. You don't trust me, she accused. I do, I insisted, my voice sharp. I just need to know where you are, her eyes narrowed. That's not love, Mark. That's a prison. And another memory, the night I found lipstick on her blouse. She swore it was nothing. A friend's hug, a smear from a borrowed jacket. But I hadn't believed her. I'd thrown the blouse across the room, demanding the truth. She'd stood there, silent, letting me unravel, never once giving me the reassurance I begged for. Now, sitting in a gray police room decades later, those scenes replayed with new weight. Had I been protecting our marriage or slowly smothering it? The detectives weren't the only ones digging. My lawyer pressed me hard too. Mark, perception matters. Right now, her story is painting you as an abuser. Even if you didn't try to kill her, they'll believe you pushed her to the edge. I buried my face in my hands. She's twisting everything. She always did. She made me question my own memory, my own sanity. One minute I was her world, the next I was her monster. That was the truth I couldn't shake. The years of subtle manipulation. The way she'd start fights, then deny they happened. The way she'd flirt in front of me, then laugh and call me paranoid when I reacted. She could spin the world until up felt like down. But maybe I wasn't innocent either. Maybe the truth was that we had destroyed each other, one cut at a time until nothing remained but scars. I caught my reflection in the interrogation mirror. My face was lined, hollow, older than my years. Was I the man she described, or had she turned me into that in everyone's eyes? The uncertainty gnawed at me. I wanted to scream that I wasn't a monster, but a small part of me feared they wouldn't believe it, because sometimes I wasn't sure I believed it myself. The detectives closed their files for the day. We'll continue tomorrow, one said flatly. But know this, the past is rarely as buried as we think. I walked out of the station into the heavy night air, my mind splitting between her truth and mine. Somewhere between those two versions, the real story lived. But the question that haunted me was whether anyone, even me, could still recognize it. The words left Claire's mouth like a blade cutting through the air. I was pregnant when I left. I froze, staring at her across the sterile interview room table. My breath caught in my chest. The fluorescent lights above buzzed, but all I heard was a roar in my ears. Pregnant. 22 years ago, and I hadn't known. That's not possible, I managed, my throat dry. You would have told me. You would have said something. Her eyes flicked toward me, cold and sharp. Would I? You think you knew me that well? The detective leaned forward, his pen scratching notes. Mrs. Turner, are you saying the child was born? Claire crossed her arms, her gaze never leaving mine. I'm saying he doesn't get to know everything. Not after what he did to me. Her words landed heavier than any accusation of abuse. A child, my child. Out there somewhere, or maybe gone, maybe just another of her cruel manipulations. My mind twisted, replaying every night we'd shared, every argument, every silence. Had she been carrying life inside her while telling me she was done with us? I tried to hold her stare, but it was like staring into a void. If this is true, I whispered, why hide it? Why vanish? Why let me rot in prison without ever saying a word? Her lips curved into a bitter half-smile. Because the truth would have destroyed you more than any sentence ever could. I slammed my hand against the table, the sound echoing through the small room. The detective shot me a warning glance, but I couldn't stop the fury clawing its way out of me. Destroyed me? You already did that, Claire. You buried me alive with your lies. Now you're telling me there might be a son or daughter out there, my blood, who's lived without me for 22 years. She didn't flinch. She wanted this reaction. She wanted me cracked open. The detective broke the silence. Mr. Turner, calm down. If there is a child involved, we'll need documentation, medical records, proof. But Claire only leaned back, her voice low, venomous. Proof is slippery, detective. Memories are slippery. You'll never know what's real and what's not. Gaslighting. Again, she thrived on it. She twisted the knife. Left me wondering if she'd truly been pregnant, or if this was just another hallucination she wanted to force-feed me. But what if it was true? What if there was a grown man or woman out there who shared my eyes, my name, my blood? The thought tore something loose inside me. I barely remembered leaving the station. My lawyer trailed me muttering about strategy, but his words were nothing more than static. Outside, the night air hit me hard. My knees threatened to buckle. A child. A hidden life. My mind spiraled back to our last fight before she vanished. Her face pale, her body tense. Had there been signs? Had she clutched her stomach? Did she try to tell me and I refused to listen? I pressed my palms against my temples. I couldn't trust my memories anymore. Claire had infected them, bent them, poisoned them until nothing was certain. But one thing was clear. If there was a child, I had to find them. Even if it killed me. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, old newspaper clippings spread out before me. Reports of Claire's disappearance, photos of her smiling at community events, rumors of sightings that led nowhere, and in the margins of my thoughts, one desperate question. Where is my child? I didn't know if I was chasing the truth or another one of her lies. But I knew this. I couldn't let her control the story anymore. The knock still echoed in my chest as I opened the door. A man stood there, tall, graying at the temples, but his eyes sharp, alive with a kind of smugness I recognized instantly. Mark Turner, he said, his voice cool. We need to talk. I studied his face. There was something uncomfortably familiar about him, though I couldn't place it. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that wasn't earned overnight. Who the hell are you? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped past me, uninvited, into my living room, as though he owned the place. My pulse spiked. I'd spent years behind bars. I didn't take kindly to strangers walking into my home. Finally, he turned, hands in his coat pockets. Daniel Reed. Claire and I, we go back a long way. The name hit me like a sucker punch. Daniel. The co-worker she always swore was just a friend. The one I'd accused her of leaning on too much. The one she defended with venom whenever I brought it up. My throat tightened. You? Yes, he said simply. Me? I wanted to throw him out, but my legs felt cemented to the floor. He smirked. You were always so predictable, Mark. Angry, controlling, desperate to hold on to something you never really had. Claire deserved better. That's why I helped her disappear. The room tilted. Disappear? The word scraped my throat raw. Daniel's eyes glittered with satisfaction. 22 years ago, she came to me terrified. Said you'd hurt her, maybe even kill her if she stayed. I believed her. I protected her, gave her a new life. Rage boiled through me, but underneath it, a nauseating seed of doubt twisted. Had she gone to him willingly? Or had he stolen her with promises of safety? Where is the child? I demanded, my voice shaking. For the first time, his confidence faltered. His gaze dropped just briefly. That's not for you to know. That slip told me everything. He knew. He knew whether Claire had carried my child, whether someone out there carried my name without ever knowing it. The silence stretched before he finally spoke again. Claire's telling the truth now. She was trapped with you, Mark. That's why she ran. The jury will believe her. They'll believe me. I was there when she cried. I was there when she bled. The words struck harder than fists. He wasn't just her savior, he was her witness. The prosecution's perfect ally. But then something in his tone caught me. He spoke with conviction, yes, but beneath it lingered something else. Bitterness, regret, maybe even envy. If you cared so much, I spat, why hide her all these years? Why let her crawl back now? His jaw tightened, a pause. Then because she chose it, she chose to come back. And some choices even I can't protect her from. That sentence hung in the air like smoke. There it was, the crack in his armor. For 2 decades, he'd kept her hidden. Now, suddenly, he was letting her stand in the light. Why? Before I could press him, he moved toward the door. You'll see me again, Mark, in court. And when you do, remember, she trusted me when she couldn't trust you. He left me there, shaking, the silence in my house deafening. I sat down hard, my mind spiraling. Daniel, the other man. The ghost that had haunted my marriage had a face now. He had motives tangled in love, obsession, and something darker. But why step forward now, after protecting her all these years? I didn't have the answer. All I knew was that the battlefield had widened. It wasn't just me and Claire anymore. Now there was him, the man who'd stolen my wife, maybe my child, and rewritten the story of my life. The courtroom felt colder the day Daniel took his seat beside Claire. His presence was a statement, a living reminder that I wasn't just on trial for what happened 22 years ago. I was on trial for every shadow of my marriage. The prosecution painted a portrait of me with broad, damning strokes. Mark Turner, they declared, was a jealous, controlling husband. Claire had no choice but to run. Daniel Reed was her lifeline, her protector. Today, the truth finally comes to light, and the public drank it in. Headlines screamed across every paper, every screen. Victim alive after 22 years. Husband faces renewed allegations. People in the gallery glared at me as if the verdict had already been signed. But beneath the noise, cracks began to appear. Detectives unearthed her travel records, or rather the absence of them. Claire swore she'd been living under a different name in Oregon since 2003, but a DMV record showed a woman matching her description. Renewing a license in Nevada in 2007, a hotel clerk from Arizona vaguely remembered her in 2010. Each inconsistency frayed the edges of her story. My lawyer pressed the issue. If she feared for her life, why move so freely? Why take the risk of public transactions? And why surface only now? The judge listened, but the jury's eyes stayed fixed on Claire. She wept at the perfect moments, her voice trembling as she spoke of years in hiding, praying he'd never find me. And I sat there, powerless, watching the truth warp in front of me. At night, alone in my apartment, the psychological warfare continued. Her words burrowed into me like worms. I was pregnant when I left. You controlled me. You wanted me gone. I replayed every argument, every slammed door. Every night I sat waiting for her to come home. My own mind betrayed me. Did I slam my fists on the table harder than I remembered? Did I grip her wrist when she tried to walk away? Did I raise my voice too often, too sharp, too cruel? The detective's inconsistencies offered me lifelines, but Claire cut them away with surgical precision. I was terrified. Of course I moved. Of course I made mistakes. But fear doesn't always follow a clean path. The jury nodded. The gallery sighed sympathetically. And I realized something horrifying. It wasn't about the facts anymore. It was about the story. Her story. One afternoon during cross-examination, my lawyer caught a slip. You testified you had no contact with Daniel until after you vanished, correct? Yes, she said firmly. And yet we have a phone record from 2 weeks before your disappearance showing repeated calls to his office. Care to explain? For the first time, her mask cracked. A flicker of hesitation, a glance toward Daniel. But then she straightened, her voice soft. I was reaching out for help, because I knew Mark was dangerous, and Daniel was the only one I could trust. The jurors leaned forward, drinking it in. My lawyer's point was lost in the flood of sympathy. I clenched my fists beneath the table. I could feel her winning, not with facts, but with feelings. She was rewriting our marriage in real time, and the world believed her. That night, I stood before my bathroom mirror, gripping the sink until my knuckles whitened. My reflection looked back, hollow-eyed, worn. I whispered to myself, maybe I did destroy her. Maybe I don't even remember it right. The doubt was poison, and she knew it. Still, the inconsistencies nagged at me. Why so many holes in her timeline? Why the sudden reappearance after 2 decades of silence? And why Daniel? Why step into the light now? Something wasn't adding up. I couldn't prove it yet, but I felt it in my bones. Claire's story wasn't airtight. She had lied before. She was lying now. And if I could just find the thread, the whole web would collapse. The past had a way of resurfacing when you least expected it. This time, it came in a small plastic evidence bag, carried into the courtroom like a ghost in someone's hands. The detective held it up. During a recent examination of the Turner residence, dried blood was found beneath floorboards in the master bedroom. The sample has been sent for DNA testing. The room went still. My stomach dropped. That house had been stripped bare, investigated decades ago, yet somehow the walls still bled. Claire lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. Perfect timing, perfect theater. My lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. And just like that, the case shifted again, the prosecution seizing it like a weapon. Ladies and gentlemen, here is proof that Claire feared for her life. Blood doesn't lie, but DNA sometimes does. When the results came back, they were inconclusive. Partial match, not definitive. The lab couldn't say whether the blood belonged to Claire or someone else entirely. It should have been a victory for me. Uncertainty was supposed to be on my side. But the media twisted it. Blood found in Turner home. Claire narrowly escaped death. The story wrote itself, and I was the villain in every headline. At night, I couldn't sleep. I saw the stain, dark and spreading across our bedroom floor. I racked my memory, desperate. Had there been a fight violent enough to draw blood? Broken glass, a cut, a nosebleed? I remembered shouting, slamming doors, her tear, but never blood. Unless she staged it. The thought burrowed into me like rot. What if she planted it back then, knowing one day it would damn me? Or worse, what if she planted it now, sneaking into that old house after her return, just to twist the knife deeper? I paced my apartment until my legs ached, the paranoia suffocating me. I imagined her smirk as she watched the world turn against me again. This wasn't justice. This was vengeance. A 22-year plan executed flawlessly. I confronted my lawyer with the idea. She's orchestrating this. She wants me buried twice. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mark, juries don't convict on conspiracies. They convict on stories they can understand. And right now, hers makes sense. You need evidence. Real evidence, but what was real anymore? Every memory I reached for slipped through my fingers, reshaped by her words, by Daniel's testimony, by the whispers of the crowd. Still, one thing gnawed at me. The blood was beneath floorboards, hidden, not visible. How had investigators missed it back then? And why had it been discovered only now, just as Claire reappeared? It was too neat, too convenient. I sat alone that night, the city lights flickering outside my window, and whispered to the empty room. She came back for me. Not for the truth, for revenge. And once the thought was spoken, I couldn't unthink it. Every glance she gave me in court, every carefully placed tremble in her voice, every shadow Daniel cast beside her, it all clicked. She hadn't returned to heal. She had returned to finish what she started. The note burned in my hand all night. The blood isn't hers. Those words echoed in my skull like a curse. If not Claire's, then whose? And who had slipped the message under my door? By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to look her in the eye without lawyers, judges, or cameras between us. Just her and me, the way it should have been years ago before everything rotted. I waited outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed like vultures, but when she finally appeared, I stepped forward. Claire, we need to talk. Her eyes flickered, uncertain for a fraction of a second before she nodded. Daniel tried to follow, but she held up her hand. I'll handle this. We ended up in a narrow alley behind the courthouse, the city buzzing beyond the brick walls. For a moment, silence pressed down on us. Then I said it. They found blood. And someone told me it isn't yours. She smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. You always were easy to bait, Mark. You can't handle not knowing. I can handle the truth. What I can't handle is 22 years of lies. My voice cracked, the weight of everything pressing against my ribs. You vanished. You let them bury me alive. And now you walk back in, playing victim while the world spits on me. Why? Her jaw tightened. You think I had a choice? You don't know what it was like. Every day was survival. Every breath. You made it sound so simple, but you never saw the things I saw. Don't twist this. I stepped closer, anger rising like fire in my chest. You're punishing me for something I didn't do. For something that never even happened. Her voice broke. You think you're innocent. You broke me, Mark. Every word, every doubt, every night you came home smelling of someone else. You were already guilty before I disappeared. I froze. Smelling of someone else? She nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks now. Don't lie. I knew about her. The late-night calls, the missed dinners. You think I didn't notice? I shook my head violently. There was no one else. You were paranoid, Claire. You built stories in your head and called them truth. For a second, she wavered. Her lips trembled, her breath hitching. But then she straightened, wiping her face with shaking hands. You always deny, always deflect. You don't even realize how much damage you cause just by existing. Damage? My chest ached as I spat the word. I lost everything. My career, my freedom, my family. 22 years of my life rotting in a cell thinking of you, wondering if you were alive or dead. And you talk about damage. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And I lost myself. We stood there, both broken, both bleeding invisible wounds. Neither of us willing to expose the deepest cut. Finally, I asked softer this time, what really happened, Claire? Why come back now? Her eyes darted away, then back to me. A war raged inside her. I could see it. But instead of answering, she leaned closer. So close I felt her breath on my ear. You'll never be free of me, she whispered. The words slid under my skin like knives, colder than the prison bars I'd once gripped, sharper than any verdict. And in that instant, I understood this wasn't about justice. It was about chains, invisible but unbreakable, binding us together forever. Transition to chapter 11. As she walked away, I unfolded the note again. The letters blurred, but their meaning didn't. The blood isn't hers. If not hers, then whose? Her whisper clung to me like smoke. You'll never be free of me. The trial stretched for weeks, but each day felt like the same endless loop. Detectives brought forward scraps of evidence. The blood in our old home, the timeline of her disappearance, Daniel's testimony. But none of it fit neatly together. One day I was painted as a monster. The next as a man wronged beyond recognition. The anonymous note still burned in my pocket. The blood isn't hers. I tried to hand it to my attorney, but without a source, it was meaningless. Hearsay against a storm of emotions. In a courtroom, emotions often outweighed truth. Claire sat across from me through it all, her gaze steady, unflinching. Sometimes, in rare, unguarded moments, her mask slipped and I saw fear. Other times, there was only cold satisfaction, as if watching me squirm was the justice she had been waiting decades to deliver. Then came the collapse. The DNA analysis on the blood, inconclusive. The witness statements, contradictory. Her story, shifting with every retelling. The judge finally declared what everyone feared. There was no way to establish the truth. The law had nothing left to hold me with. I was free. Again. But as I walked out of the courthouse, past the cameras and the stairs, I knew the word free meant nothing. Strangers hissed insults, shouted accusations. Some spat at the ground near my feet. To them, I would always be the man who killed his wife and got away with it. My reputation was a corpse they'd never stop digging up. And Claire, she vanished. No forwarding address, no public statement, no goodbye. One moment she was there, the next she was gone. Like a ghost slipping back into the shadows. For nights afterward, I sat alone in the wreckage of my apartment, staring at the wedding photo I had dug out of an old box. We were smiling in that picture, young, stupid, believing in forever. I traced her face with my finger, asking questions I knew would never be answered, Had she been a victim, fleeing from a man she feared? Or a master manipulator, weaving a story so tight the world couldn't see through it? Was I innocent, or had I become guilty simply by living under her shadow? The silence mocked me. Sometimes I swore I heard her laugh outside my window. Sometimes the phone rang, and when I picked up, no one spoke. Only the faintest sound of breathing, as if reminding me she was still out there. And every time I thought of her last words, "You'll never be free of me." The city moved on, but I didn't. I carried the trial, the whispers, the headlines, everywhere I went. Every stranger's glance felt like a judgment. Every creak in the night felt like her footsteps returning. Justice had failed. Revenge had failed, and I was left in the purgatory between them. I picked up the photo again, held it in the half-light of my living room. Her eyes stared back at me from 22 years ago, full of a love I no longer trusted. I whispered into the stillness, "Were you ever truly the victim, Claire?" The photo gave no answer, only the walls, the shadows, and the silence, and the lingering dread that one day she would return again.